The 1982 FIA Formula 1 World Championship was the 33rd Formula 1 World Championship for drivers and the 25th Formula 1 World Championship for constructors. The season featured 16 rounds between the 23rd of January and the 25th of September. The Drivers' Championship was won by Keke Rosberg and the Constructors' Championship by Scuderia Ferrari. The championship started with a driver's strike at the season opener in South Africa and saw a partial race boycott as part of the ongoing FISA-FOCA war at the San Marino Grand Prix. Unfortunately, the season 1982 there was the dramatic death of Gilles Villeneuve during qualifying for the Belgian Grand Prix and Riccardo Paletti at the start of the Canadian Grand Prix. Championship frontrunner Didier Pironi also suffered a career-ending accident while qualifying for the German Grand Prix. These incidents and several other major accidents led to regulation changes to increase driver safety for the 1983 season. Eventual champion Rosberg won only one race all season, the Swiss Grand Prix, but consistency gave him the Drivers' Championship, 5 points clear of Pironi and John Watson. Rosberg was the second driver to win the championship, having won only one race in the season, after Mike Hawthorn in 1958. 11 different drivers from 7 different teams won a race during the season, with no driver winning more than twice. There was also a run of 9 different winners in 9 consecutive races from the Monaco Grand Prix to the Swiss Grand Prix. Ferrari, who replaced Villeneuve with Patrick Tambay and Pironi with 1978 world champion Mario Andretti, managed to score enough points to secure the Constructors' Championship, finishing 5 points clear of McLaren with Renault third. All teams and constructors who had competed in 1981 returned for the new season. Brabham had entered an engine supply deal with German car manufacturer BMW for the use of their inline-4 turbo engines. The team announced in January that they were committing to the use of the new BMW engine throughout the season, but after experiencing reliability problems with it, they reverted to the Cosworth DFV motor several times during the season. At the end of the 1981 season, both Williams drivers, 1980 world champion Alan Jones and Carlos Reutemann, had announced their retirement from racing. Reutemann did in fact return for 1982, competing in the first 2 races, before retiring unexpectedly at the end of March. Jones was replaced by Keke Rosberg, who had previously entered 36 Grands Prix, with a third-place finish as his best result. The off-season saw rumors of several former champions returning to the sport, but in the end only double world champion Niki Lauda returned to Formula 1 after an absence of 2 years to partner John Watson at McLaren. Ferrari and Renault retained their race-winning lineups of Gilles Villeneuve and Didier Pironi and Alain Prost and René Arnoux, respectively. At Brabham, defending world champion Nelson Piquet remained with the team, and was partnered by Riccardo Patrese, who moved from Arrows to replace Hector Ribécu. The Osella team gave Riccardo Paletti his Grand Prix debut, while Toleman replaced Brian Henton with Teo Fobbi, also a newcomer to Formula 1. Mark Schurrer was hired by Arrows, but broke both his feet in pre-season testing at Kyalami. He was set to be replaced by Patrick Tambay, who was then fired after taking part in the driver's strike at that race, and the seat went to Henton. Eliseo Salazar transferred from Ensign Racing to the ATS team. Following Reutemann's retirement, Williams hired 1978 world champion Mario Andretti as a one-off replacement for the United States Grand Prix West. Derek Daly then became the permanent second driver at the team, as Andretti had racing obligations in the United States to fulfill. At Team Lotus, Nigel Mansell missed 2 races due to injuries from a crash in Canada. His substitute at the Dutch Grand Prix was Roberto Marino, who failed to qualify. Mansell attempted a comeback at Brands Hatch, but was again replaced at the French Grand Prix, this time by Jeff Lees. An accident at the race in France led Johan Mass, already deeply shaken by the fatal crash of Villeneuve, in which he was involved, to walk away from Grand Prix racing. He was replaced at March by Rupert Keegan. Swedish driver Slim Borgard had moved from ATS to Tyrrell in the off-season, but was forced to leave the team after only 3 races when his sponsorship money ran out. Henton took his place from the Belgian Grand Prix onwards, as Schurrer returned to Arrows after his injuries had healed. In this season there were some calendar changes. The Argentine Grand Prix was scheduled to take place on the 7th of March, but was cancelled due to lack of sponsors, as several pulled out due to uncertainty following the drivers' strike in the opening race. The Grand Prix was also cancelled due to political unrest in Argentina. The Spanish Grand Prix was omitted from the calendar for several reasons. The Circuito del Jarama, where the race had been held the previous year, was unpopular with the drivers. In addition, the organizers had failed to pay their fees for 1981. Although the race was reinstated for the 27th of June after the organizers had paid off their debts to the Formula 1 Constructors Association, FOCA, protests from the teams over the dangerous nature, the very narrow track, and outdated facilities of the Jarama venue led to the race being cancelled. 2 new races were added to the calendar compared to 1981, the Detroit Grand Prix and the Swiss Grand Prix, the latter to be held at Dijon-Prenoir in France since motor racing has been outlawed in Switzerland since the 1955 Sierra Leone's Mans disaster. The addition of Detroit meant that the United States hosted 3 Grands Prix, the only time one country had more than 2 races in one season until 2020, when Italy also hosted 3 Grands Prix. Starting in the early 1970s, Bernie Ecclestone, owner of the Brabham team, had seized control of the Formula 1 Constructors Association, later renamed Formula 1 Constructors Association. In this role, he began to negotiate more lucrative contracts between the teams and the track owners, including obtaining full control over television rights for FOCA. Realizing the growing influence of Ecclestone and FOCA, the sport's governing body, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, FIA, and its head, Paul Metternich, instated Frenchman Jean-Marie Bailstré as the head of the Commission Sportive Internationale in 1978, which was then renamed to Fédération Internationale du Sport Automobile, FISA. FIA delegated running of the sporting regulations governing Formula 1 to FISA. Over the following years, a power struggle developed between FOCA and FISA and Ecclestone and Bailstré in particular. This conflict is generally referred to as the FISA-FOCA War. FOCA consisted of the majorly British constructor teams, while the manufacturer or works teams, Renault, Ferrari, Alfa Romeo and Talbot Ligier, together with Osella and Toleman, were aligned with FISA. The conflict came to a head at the 1980 Spanish Grand Prix, where the drivers of teams belonging to FOCA boycotted the obligatory drivers' briefing and were threatened by FISA with having their licenses revoked. The race went ahead as a non-championship event, without the non-FOCA aligned teams participating. Then FOCA agreed to the famous but secret Concord Agreement with FISA in March 1981. But let go now to discover a new epic, exciting and dramatic new Formula 1 season. Before the start of the season, all drivers had received a letter from FISA, containing an application form for a new super license. This new document stated that drivers would not be allowed to switch teams freely during the course of the season, with their license being withdrawn should they do so. Additionally, the document forbade drivers from actions which might harm the moral or material interests of Formula 1. The returning Lauda was displeased by this and communicated with Pironi, head of the Grand Prix Drivers Association, GPDA. They contacted other drivers and ultimately, 6 drivers refused to sign the document, those being Lauda, Pironi, Villeneuve, Arnoux, Bruno Giacomelli and Andrea de Cesaris. On the Wednesday between testing and the first practice session of the South African Grand Prix, during a meeting of the Formula 1 Commission, Pironi, on behalf of the drivers, objected to the license application. Bailstré reacted strongly, excluding all drivers who had not signed from the following day's practice session. The drivers, almost all of them and not just the ones who had refused to sign, in turn reacted by going on strike the next day, boarding a bus to a nearby hotel. The conflict continued until the next day, the Friday before the race was set to take place. It was partially resolved shortly before noon that day, with the drivers receiving half-hearted assurances towards their demands. They would ultimately be fined $5,000 each for the strike, with the new super license being scrapped. Following the events in South Africa, the GPDA disbanded at a driver meeting in Paris, being replaced by the Professional Racing Drivers Association, PRDA. When qualifying finally commenced, Arnoux took pole position from Piquet, with Villeneuve and Patrese on the second row of the grid. At the start, Arnoux led while Piquet did not get away well and was overtaken by several cars, including Prost, who jumped from 5th to 2nd. Piquet and Villeneuve retired early, while Prost took the lead from his teammate Arnoux on lap 14. He would lead until lap 41, when he punctured his left rear tyre, forcing him to come into the pit lane for new tyres. He emerged in 8th place, but with this fresh set, Prost was the quickest driver on the course, allowing him to overtake relatively easily. On lap 68, he once again took the leading position from Arnoux and went on to win the race. Reutemann also overtook Arnoux late in the race and finished second, with Lauda in 4th place on his return to Formula 1 racing. The teams then travelled to Brazil for the second round. Brabham abandoned their turbocharged BT50 for the time being on grounds of its unreliability, reverting to an updated BT49D for this race, powered by the Cosworth DFV engine. The cars once again proved just how quick they had become, when Prost qualified on pole position 6.27 seconds faster than Piquet had done the year before. Villeneuve was second on the grid and went into the lead at the start, followed by Rosberg, with the two Renault drivers behind. Rosberg fell behind the Renaults on the first lap and was overtaken by Patrese on lap 3 and by Piquet 2 laps later. Villeneuve led until lap 30 when he spun out. This allowed Piquet into the lead, closely followed by Rosberg, with the two having battled for position during the preceding laps. The order remained to the finish, with Piquet winning from Rosberg, Prost, Watson, and Mansell. The heavy strain posed onto the drivers by the bumpy circuit and hot, humid weather was showcased not only by Patrese retiring on lap 34 due to exhaustion, but also when Piquet fainted on the winner's rostrum. Following the race, both Ferrari and Renault protested the first and second place finishes of Piquet and Rosberg, citing the water tanks used by Brabham and Williams to be illegal. The case was taken to FISA in Paris, with no outcome until after the next race. The third race of the season took place at the street circuit in Long Beach. During Saturday's qualifying, Lauda did just one run of a few laps, setting a fast time that put him on top of the leaderboard. In the closing seconds of the session, De Cesaris bettered Lauda's time, clinching pole position for Alfa Romeo. De Cesaris had been ousted by McLaren for Lauda over the winter and was moved to tears by his accomplishment. De Cesaris led from the start, while Lauda was overtaken by Arnoux for second place. On lap 6, Giacomelli, running fourth, tried to outbrake Lauda and in the process hit Arnoux, forcing both to retire. This allowed Villeneuve into third place, ahead of Watson. Pironi and Prost both retired after hitting the wall on lap 7 and 11 respectively. On lap 15, Lauda took advantage of De Cesaris missing a gear change and moved into the lead, immediately beginning to pull away. Rosberg overtook Villeneuve for third on lap 21. This turned into second place on lap 34, when De Cesaris crashed into the wall after his engine had failed. The order remained until the checkered flag, with Lauda winning in only his third Grand Prix back in the sport. Villeneuve was later excluded from the results in Long Beach, following a protest by Ken Tyrrell over Ferrari's use of a double rear wing. In the week before the next round, the San Marino Grand Prix, the FIA International Court of Appeal sided with Ferrari and Renault on their complaint over the water tanks at the race in Brazil and disqualified Piquet and Rosberg, handing victory to Prost. It was further decided that the cars would now be weighed after the race in the condition in which they had finished, eliminating the Cosworth-powered team's use of water tanks to increase their performance. All other runners' results from the Brazilian Grand Prix were upheld, including Watson's, who inherited second place even though his use of the water tanks had been as illegal as the others. The FOCA teams requested a postponement of the next race until July to allow consideration of the effects of the court's judgment, on the grounds that it changed the regulations of the sport. The race organizers refused to delay the race, which went ahead without the majority of the FOCA teams. At this stage in the championship, Prost led with 18 points, 6 ahead of Lauda, with Rosberg and Watson sharing third position on 8 points. With the FOCA teams boycotting the race, the San Marino Grand Prix was run with just 14 cars present. The turbocharged Renaults and Ferraris were heavily favored and Arnoux duly took pole position ahead of Prost, with Villeneuve and Pironi on the second row. Due to the fast nature of the Imola track, Ferrari team boss Mauro Forghieri told his drivers to save fuel. Arnoux led from the start while Prost lost 2 positions to the Ferrari drivers on the first lap. He eventually retired on lap 7. After some changes of position with Villeneuve and Pironi, Arnoux pulled away, but retired as well after 44 laps when his engine expired. This left only the Ferrari drivers in a position to win the Grand Prix. Their team held out slow signs from the pit wall, urging them to conserve fuel. Villeneuve, who led, understood this to mean that the cars were to finish in the current order. Pironi appeared to disregard the signals from the pit wall and took the lead on lap 46. He then sped up, pulling Villeneuve with him, who retook the lead again on lap 49. They changed position 3 more times. As Villeneuve slowed down each time he took the lead, Pironi would overtake him again. Eventually, Pironi won the race and Villeneuve was furious at his teammate for allegedly not following team orders. Villeneuve said that he would never speak to Pironi again. 2 weeks later, the paddock moved to Zolder for the Belgian Grand Prix. In qualifying, Villeneuve went out onto the track on his second set of fast tyres, which were already used and had only one more fast lap to go before their performance became compromised. On his flying lap, he failed to better the time of teammate Pironi, but instead of slowing down, as drivers usually did on laps at the end of which they were supposed to head back to the pits, Villeneuve continued to drive fast. It has been speculated that he was determined to beat Pironi's time due to the animosity between the two. It is unclear if this is true, with Forghieri claiming that Villeneuve had indeed planned to return to the pit lane. In any event, Villeneuve caught Johan Mass traveling much more slowly through a left-handed bend and moved to the right to pass him at the same instant that Mass also moved right to let Villeneuve through on the racing line. The two collided and Villeneuve was thrown out of his disintegrating car. He died of a fractured neck in a local hospital at 9:12 that evening. Ferrari withdrew from the race, which Watson won for McLaren. His teammate Lauda, who had finished third behind Rosberg, was disqualified after the race for an underweight car. The results were dominated by the returning FOCA teams. Even the only turbo-engined finisher, Piquet, was one of them, after Brabham reintroduced the BMW-powered BT50 for this race.